You can, and this is an extreme case. It's not something that would apply to any golfer in the real world. But I mean, endurance athletes die of having too much water. It's hyponatremia, it's called, where you dilute the salt content in your blood. So you're taking in water, but you're sweating out electrolytes, and the water you're taking in is doing more harm than good because it's further diluting the mineral balance that you've got. So that is why drinking water past a point isn't hydrating you. What you need is electrolytes to get that balance correct in your bloodstream.
Today we are joined by Ben Waters. Ben caddied last year on the Korn Ferry Tour and is a nutritionist. Ben does a deep dive on nutrition in golf and lays out a lot of the pitfalls that golfers can fall into. Additionally, Ben tells us what it was like caddying on the Korn Ferry Tour and how he picked it up quickly with minimal caddying experience. We hope you enjoy the episode. Appreciate you taking the time to join us, Ben. You know, a lot of our episodes start the same way, which is how did you get into golf? And I think this is no different question for you here. We know that you caddied on Korn Ferry for a bit. You do nutrition and fitness and all that revolving around golf. So tell us just how you got into golf in general.
Yeah, well, so it started. I think I was 14 the first time I went to what was my local club at home. So I come from a golfing family. So my dad was a member of that club. My granddad was a member of that club. My auntie and my cousin played in the ladies' teams. My cousin started with me at the same time. So it was sort of inevitable. Do you know what I mean? It got to the only surprise is that it took till I was 14, I think. So, I mean, that's sort of where it started. It's never been a career option for me. I was very unremarkable as a junior. You know, played in the junior team, but that was about it. Never troubled any county teams or state teams or anything like that. And then so for me, soccer was my main sport. Obviously, football to me, soccer to you guys. Worked nicely. Soccer in the winter, golf in the summer. That was pretty much how it went until. So when I went to college, so my university to me, college to you guys, I was playing a lot of cricket. So, you know, our version of baseball, effectively. So that was my main sport through university. Golf took a bit of a backseat. Soccer, football took a bit of a backseat until when I finished college, I went back home, started working only for the summer at West Cornwall Golf Club, which is where Harry played. So that's how we sort of reconnected. He was also at the first club I was at when I was younger, and then he was also there. And that's when I sort of got properly back into golf and was playing golf there then. And then it sort of flew from there, just started playing again until obviously Harry got his tour card and I got a phone call to come to America.
Very cool. When it came to playing golf, when you picked it up a second time, how good did you get? And was it something that you were like, okay, like, you know, I'm just going to do this for fun? Or did you try to take it a little more seriously as you were going along? Because you're obviously serious about nutrition and serious about fitness and serious about caddying, all of which indicate someone who's serious about what they do in most aspects.
Yeah, I think anyone who knows me would probably have chuckled when you asked that question because I can't do anything without taking it seriously. So yeah, that's not really an option. I mean, it was funny that I was immediately a better player coming back than when I left, probably because of the fitness stuff. I mean, I'm 6'5", 200 pounds. Like once I matured into an adult, you just physically, I was from playing cricket, from playing football. I was just a better athlete ultimately. So I was a better golfer just than when I was a 16-year-old kid just trying to whack it as hard as you can.
So why don't you talk about how you started caddying, and then that summer where you pulled away from your job and you caddied for a whole season?
Yeah, so it was largely out of the blue in the sense of when Harry got his tour card. I was working as a CPA, so then a chartered accountant at home, CPA to you guys. Got the call to come out, so obviously he knew I knew about golf. You know, I played golf, so wanted me on the bag. So I you can't really turn down that opportunity. So it was very much I was learning it on the job. I wasn't a caddy that he recruited. It was a case of he obviously thought he could turn me into the caddy that he needed, and a lot of it was we were discussing nutrition and things like that. So I was also coming into the team in that sense more than just the caddying element of it. So I mean that was how it started. My first week, which was Louisiana, so that was also the first week after COVID. So it was a pretty stacked field. Obviously, everybody with a tour card anywhere was trying to play golf. So he barely got in on his number because of the amount of people. And I remember I was turned up and you had like Aaron Badley there on the putting green. It was literally my job was, don't stand on anyone's line, don't lose a club, things like that. Like, and then I just learned from there. And as I'm sure we'll get into later on, we both started doing some of the more technical stuff like Decade. I mean, this podcast might turn into an ode to Scott Fawcett because I'm not the first person on here to mention Decade, and I'm sure I won't be the last. So we started developing things like that, and it sort of grew from there really as I settled into the job, I guess.
Very cool. When it came to getting out there, I know it's a lot to adjust to when you go to something as serious as that. I can remember caddying in the USAM, and everybody's particular about all sorts of different things, where you stand, et cetera. And Cooper and I even had recent experience with that at the Jones Cup. On one of the holes, there's a guy who's very particular about where people stood, even when he had a 3-footer. So it's a lot to adjust to where everyone else is, but it's also a lot to adjust to the player that you're working with. And you and Harry are friends. Tell us a little bit about what it was like learning on the job, but also learning with a friend, and also what it was like helping to provide value, because you brought value on the nutrition. And we'll dive more into where you got your nutrition background in a bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously it is very much going in at the deep end, go your first caddying job, being on the Korn Ferry Tour ultimately. So it was just a case of learning as fast as you possibly can to try and add value as quickly as you can, obviously, and then trying where you can to add value and learn new things together. So you try and get out of the stage where it's him teaching you what he wants from you, where you both start obviously developing your as a team and you start learning new things. And that was where it was actually a friend who we were with in Greenville who suggested Decade and introduced it to both of us. I'm not claiming that one, but then I was the one that took that on, and I then learned how to do it, and I was the one providing the Decade targets. And you kind of, it all just sort of snowballs really, I think, because like that was also his first year on tour, so it was a learning experience for him as well in every sense.
So what were some of the changes that you saw in performance after implementing Decade on the bag? And what were some of the changes that you saw in the player caddy relationship after implementing Decade?
So the first week we implemented Decade, we won. That was the week in Wichita. That was so that was kind of oh yeah, this works, doesn't it? So it was an immediate impact. It wasn't a case of where you try something out for a while and you think, oh, should I, shouldn't I, are we carrying it on? It was immediately, this is good. And it helped a lot. It helped the relationship a lot, because for me, with my sort of lack of experience at the time, and as we were discussing off air then, I'm a CPA when I'm not doing the nutrition stuff. So I'm a numbers guy. So this was the holy grail for me. This almost turned me into a caddy in a lot of senses. Like, so yeah, it was, and as both of us could potentially overthink things, I think it's objective. Do you know what I mean? It's you, that is your target. You are playing to that target. If something goes wrong, you look elsewhere. Whereas it's so easy to, when you're doing everything by feel or you finger in the air type stuff, then when you do get a bad outcome, you question everything. Then you think, well, should the line have been the lady in the red shirt, not that tree, and things like that. So it made a massive difference, definitely. And then so since having me on the bag, he re-implemented Decade this season and won again. So now he's on the PGA Tour. So
that's a nice testimonial of Decade, and that's one of the things that we like about it. And I'm analytical, Cooper's analytical, and obviously being a CPA, sounds like you are as well, it's a very nice relief. I see a lot of other like strategy mechanisms out there, or like guidelines out there, and they're not bad per se. They can be good and they can be right, but most of the time I see it, see something, I'm like, decade solved it. Decade has solved it. Like, is it? It's going to give us like as close or very close to the right mathematical answer as far as optimal target. Um, as as far as everything goes, and for most situations it can solve it. And then what it doesn't solve, it also solves. It also teaches you those principles where you come up to a tough shot, and normally you might be like, if you're just following the rules only, it's kind of, every level of mastery. When you get to mastery, not only do you understand like the actual math or other things that go behind some talent or skill, but you also understand when to break them. And decade, I think, also teaches those foundations of course management, so you know when to break them, not based on position or anything like that, but based on the actual layout of a green or something to that effect. So when you're out there, how closely did you stick with decade, but also you won your first week, and obviously winning requires luck. But when you won that first week, what did you notice as far as the difference in your targets? Some players are too conservative initially, but that's rarely the case, and more often most players are too aggressive with their targets. How did you notice your targets changing that week and thereafter?
I think it's just sort of consistency of targets and ease of coming to said target. Really, I think it takes that emotion out of it. And like you were saying, whether you're being too aggressive, whether you're being too conservative, you just don't have to think about it. And there's so much pressure when you're out there. And on the Korn Ferry Tour, you're playing for your career. You're not playing for the glory and that sort of stuff. Like it just takes that element out of it. And obviously, I'm doing the calculations. He doesn't have to think about it. I would just say the target is 2 long, 3 right, and then that gives us our number, and you go from there. There's no, but is it, the lie's not great? Should we be more conservative? Or like you said, we've got the angle, but like the angle doesn't matter that much. Like, I think consistency and just less stress. There's so much stress that if anything you can do to remove some of it is beneficial.
I think it's interesting that you bring up, how the angle doesn't matter that much. And I'd be interested to hear if your opinion on angles changed after implementing Decade. Was there a point in time where you thought angles mattered more than they do after implementing Decade, or did you never really pay attention to that?
I think it's just one of those sayings that as the mathematical revolution has happened, they've been disproved. Like you drive for show, putt for dough, and I think we all kind of believed it when you've been told it all the time by the coaches and everybody at your clubs and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think the numbers have disproven it, and you do start thinking if you've managed to find the right side of the fairway to the left pin, you can be more aggressive at it. But no, you should probably still calm down and stick to the target that it gives you.
I believe that that's one of those things also that it's nice that math has disproved a lot of the old sayings, so you don't get trapped in the follies of them. When it comes to doing decade and preparing for a tournament, that sounds like that's part of the role that you played. What other things did you do to prepare for a tournament, and what things do you recommend players do as they're preparing for tournaments?
Yeah, so I think obviously I don't want to go too much into Decade and how it works because it's not my intellectual property as much as anything else. But so that would be a large part of the practice rounds would be doing the ratings that you need to do where you assess the greens, etc. I would do the Google Earth work. So for like tee shot strategy, we took that later on. It was more the target stuff that happened at the start. But so I would do that beforehand. And then so I did the air density stuff. So we had an app basically, so which was really good. So it's an app called Flag High, and basically it means week to week you don't have to retest every time. And especially, you guys in the US, it's like playing on different continents when you go from one side to the other. You're in Utah where it's 5,000 feet and boiling hot, and then 3 weeks before that we were in Maine where you had a jacket on and it was raining. Like it's so rather than having to totally retest everything, you have your standardized yardages, and then that would calculate. You'd put in your temperature, your humidity, altitude, and that gives you that gives you all your new yardages in your bag. So then it's just a case of, verification. So when you're on the range, so he had a TrackMan. Most guys out there now have TrackMans, and you're just verifying it and just ticking the numbers off rather than having to go through almost full gap testing every week, because the ball goes 40 yards further in Utah than it did in Maine. Like it's not something, and you see a lot of guys say, it's 10% this week, and it's like, well, it's actually 60 degrees in the morning and it's 95 by the time it's peak afternoon. It's not just a flat 10%, so I would just have that. I would look at the weather forecast, pick 3 temperatures, for example, what the average is going to be when it's cold in the morning, when it's hot in the afternoon. Obviously, generally it's that way around. And then it gives us the numbers that you need. So you'd be looking at a different set of numbers depending on when you play it.
That's smart. As far as picking up on adding in those different variables to make sure you're on top of it, where did you pick that up from? And how long, like, is that something you guys started from the beginning, or is that something you guys picked up along the way? And if it's something you picked up along the way, what was the difference that you noticed in uh, results because of that?
No, that's something that he had used from before. So that was he played an event, and I can't remember where it was, but it was really high altitude. And that was, I believe that's when he first got that and thought, oh, this is brilliant. And then so then he showed me that, and then I took that on as what I did each week before we started.
Very cool. One thing I wanted to get at also, when it comes to preparation, we've talked about preparing on the course, but you also have obviously nutrition preparation that's necessary. And if you look at my bio on Twitter, it says, if it's not strokes gained, then I don't care. And what's nice is you guys are strokes gained nutrition. And so I'd love for you to kind of tell us a little bit more about how a CPA got into nutrition, how you got into nutrition. It sounds like you're an athletic guy, so it might have come from that background. And then I love the strokes gained aspect, because a lot of times people take not necessarily that you're measuring strokes gained because of nutrition, but just that connotation, because a lot of times people take the tangibles like your swing, etc., and miss out on the fact that we're living organisms that need calories and need different types of calories to produce different results as far as muscle development, energy, etc. So tell us about how you got into nutrition, and then how that kind of snowballed into providing nutritional advice and helping lead people in their golf nutrition.
Yeah, so it started was it was a long journey, but probably quite a short story. So I was quite overweight in university. I think, as a lot of people gain a few unwanted pounds in university, and I just gained a few more than most people gain. It got to, so I think in my final year, I started thinking, because it sort of got to the point that it was hindering my sport, so playing cricket and stuff at the time, and so I started trying to do something about it. But as a lot of people do when they start their journey, it's more, just stabbing in the dark. You see, oh, that exercise looks cool, I'll do that. Oh, some guy on Twitter said that this food helps you burn fat, so I'll eat that. And slowly started sort of vaguely picking up what to do. Some of the guys that I lived with played rugby and stuff, so they were quite into those sort of things. So next thing, there's loads of protein in the kitchen, so I'm taking protein shakes without really knowing why. Like we said earlier, if I do something, I do tend to take it a bit too seriously. So started doing my own research and sort of piecing things together. And then it really changed when a guy that I went to school with, who trained as a PT just back where I was from, where I'm living, and he put on Facebook that he was offering like a free session for this, or a free session, something like that. So I sent him a message, and he was like, yeah, come on over. And it was quite revolutionary seeing something done with structure and like organized, and walking into the gym, and he had his plan there, and he said, right, we're doing this, then this, and then having a structured nutritionist who was like, yeah, so I'd done like a food diary, and it's like, yeah, so try and do a bit more of this, etc. And being able to link all the dots and connect things sort of made me then, that kind of switched the gear into doing it in a structured sense. And then I started learning and I learned from him as well some of the right places to look, because as you guys probably see, there's so much terrible information on the internet about nutrition, probably more than a lot of things, to be fair. Everybody, because they eat food, thinks they're qualified as a nutritionist. Started sort of building the correct information, learning where I should be looking. And then it just got to the stage where I was helping some friends and family and was sort of doing that sort of stuff. And then it's like, well, I've got to take this to the next level now. Let's try and make some money out of it. Let's try and help people properly. Let's make it a business. So I did a couple of years studying the nutrition qualifications that I did. That happened to be then COVID hit. So obviously that helps you study when you're not. And in the UK, we had lockdowns bad. So obviously 7 months not being allowed out of your bedroom basically helps you study. Yeah, got that through, started trying to make some content and things, and then needed to niche down, as you know, sort of the marketing style thing. If you try and talk to everybody, you talk to nobody. Let's try and specialize. Let's get good. And it was golf, and obviously the caddying stuff as well. You're like, well, obviously it's going to be golf. So that's when Strokes Gain Nutrition was born, and that's pretty much the first name I came up with. And I spent ages trying to think of names, and think it was like, nah, that's still the best. That is, as long as Mark Brody doesn't sue me, that's still the best.
That's an awesome story, and I don't think that he's interested in suing you over that. But
yeah, I haven't got much for him to sue me for. So
I don't. I'm curious to hear about some of the ways that you were able to help Harry on the bag with your knowledge about nutrition. Or were there things that you changed with his diet?
Yeah, I mean, he is a very smart guy, and without me, his nutrition was a lot better than a lot of what I saw out there, to be honest. I think a lot of basic stuff can be changed. So we sort of worked on eating a bit more protein to help with the workouts. And, you know, as Cooper, as you know, from caddying out there briefly, is a grueling grind, isn't it? It really is. Like you've got to be recovering. You've got the weeks that they play in a row. So it's just focusing on that. It's focusing on, and I think a lot of this is true of most people in society, is people should eat more. When you've got that sort of lifestyle, everything is diet culture. And obviously there is an obesity issue both in the US and home here, but diet culture is such a way everybody's sort of, what's the word, like pressured into eating less. Whereas actually, no, you guys are, you know, burning thousands and thousands of calories out there. You eat more. Do you know what I mean? Don't be scared of it. Like, so I think it's those fundamental things. There's smaller things you work on, and I'm sure we'll get onto that later on, but there's always a lot of low hanging fruit. And with nutrition, you want to try and think about it sort of as a pyramid. So if anyone's seen my posts recently, it's a pyramid of importance. So you've got calories at the bottom that underpin everything. Like you've got to fuel yourself. It doesn't matter what else you do. Like you can have the nicest car in the world and use the fanciest expensive fuel, but if you haven't got enough of it, it doesn't matter. You're not going to get where you're going. And then you move your way up, and by the time you get to the top, and there's things like supplements that obviously guys at that level, an extra 3% can be the difference between winning and losing. For a lot of people, supplements don't make a big difference. Like it's knowing where you fall on what you're doing, having that structure. I think
I like the guidance that you've given as far as having those calories as a baseline, especially when it comes to golfers. I think people don't realize how many calories you burn. I didn't realize it when I was younger until I started working with a trainer. And I'm kind of like you as far as how I grew up. Now I'm 6'3", and somewhere between 200, 210 is where I would consider like my healthy weight. And I could go heavier and put on more if I needed to without an issue. But when I was going through puberty, like freshman year of high school, I was I think I was 5'4", 150, maybe 5'6", 150. I think it's 5'4" though. And by my senior year, I'm 6'1", 6'3", but I'm 170. And for my frame, like, again, that's not a lot. That's not a lot to have on my frame. So I decided once I stopped playing basketball my junior year, my senior year, I was like, I got to put on more weight. I got to be able to get a little muscle. And so I focused on that. And so I started having 4,500 to 5,000 calories a day, which is a lot of work for people to consume. But beyond just being a lot of work to consume, it provided a lot of the tools for the rest of my life because I was using, my Fitness Pal, and I think you guys have your own nutrition tracker, which I'd love for you to talk about. But I was using that, and I started, calculating. I did it for maybe 2 years straight, as far as calculating where I was. I would put on weight, then I'd drop weight, just depending on how I needed to adapt. And now that I'm 27, I really can eyeball in general. I can eyeball about where I am for a day. I can eyeball about where I am for a week. And I also, because I have a heart rate monitor that I wear during exercise, I've worn it a few times while playing golf. I can eyeball how many calories something's going to burn. So I know that if I wear it every morning when I work out. So if I go in and I have a workout um, where I burn 700 calories, I'm like, okay, my baseline in general is 500 to 600 for the amount of time I'm doing. I'm like, okay, I need to make sure I have a little bit extra today. If I go play basketball, I'll burn about 1,000 calories an hour playing basketball. And so on those days, I'm just trying to find food wherever I can find it, just in order to get enough in me. So that long-winded story, all to come back to when it comes to working with players on tour, it sounds like calories are an issue, making sure they get enough. Sounds like protein's an issue, which I think that's an issue for most people in general. As far as helping people manage that, what were the practical tips that you're like, hey, here's what we can implement to help uh, get you on the right side of this. Make sure you're not suffering from major caloric deficits, making sure you're not suffering from major protein deficits.
Yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head what you said there with eyeballing, because, and especially for guys when you're talking at tour level where you're eating from a buffet, two meals a day. You're not going to go in there and ask them how many calories are in things. So it's really valuable if you can. So there was times that I would just have him send me the picture of what he's eaten, and I would eyeball it from the picture. But if you by tracking, so like you said, MyFitnessPal, all you need, like I say, a great app, free, and just tracking for a period of time, so you can start eyeballing. And we all know the kind of foods we eat, what we like, what we're going to get drawn to. What's in most of the tournaments are going to have, vague, especially breakfast, where it's going to be eggs and oatmeal and things like that. So if you do have that ability to eyeball, it just frees you up, and it reduces the effort as well. Obviously you're not going to take a scales out in breakfast and start weighing things. So I think if you can get into that position, that's the goal. Is that so you track when you can track. Obviously, if you're at home, if you're in the hotel, if you're going out to eat. I mean, most places give you the calories now of where you're going to eat. And I think to pull that thread a little bit, I think it's really good advice to have a repertoire of foods that you eat when you're out. So, for example, we always knew Chipotle was our thing, and what you order. And the good thing about Chipotle is that it's so you can do bits. So if you're short on fats one day, you can say, oh yeah, stick avocado on it. If you need more calories, you do double meat and you put sour cream on it, cheese. Do you know what I mean? It's good that you can do that. But having a number of restaurants, whether it's Outback Steakhouse, obviously good because it's pretty much meat and veg, like knowing roughly what you're going to do. So you're not stuck there if it's late, or if you're leaving the tournament and you're knackered. You don't then just go straight to something that you shouldn't have, especially if you're playing again the next day. That's a very small window where you've got to fuel as well as you can, because you're going straight to bed and you might be waking up at 5 o'clock to go and tee off at 7 o'clock. So having that sort of strategy, that planning in advance, just so right, I need to go and eat, go into Google Maps, is there a this or this or this nearby? Right, I know what I'm going to eat, job done. So I think that's probably a couple of like low hanging fruit, a couple of things that's not only means you eat the right food, it sort of stops you eating the wrong food as well in that sense.
I remember people would always joke on the Korn Ferry tour that they should call this the Chipotle tour, because that's where everybody seems to go eat after a round. It's just so dependable and you kind of know what you're getting. But as far as on the course, eating enough calories, this is something that I've struggled with at the beginning of college. you play 36 whole days. And, as a freshman in college, I never ate enough calories on the course for those 36 whole days. And towards the end of my career, I started to wear a Whoop strap, and it's just basically like a heart rate monitor, like what Daniel was talking about. But, it would tell me I burned 4 or 5,000 calories walking 36 holes, and adding on top of that stress and maybe not the best sleep, and you're going to have to eat a whole lot of food to be able to sustain that workload. After kind of going through trying different things to be able to sustain that workload, I kind of settled on an interesting food that really helped me power through those long days. And what I ended up doing was I ate like 8 or 9 Uncrustable sandwiches. For, if you might not know what those are, those are like the little prepackaged peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. But and some people might say those are like unhealthy, or there's a lot of sugar in that and it's not good for you. But sometimes I've found that just that massive load of carbs helped me sustain the energy and focus that I needed to play. And if I was just pounding like protein shakes or something like that, my body wouldn't be able to turn that into fuel fast enough to notice a difference. So I would like to hear your thoughts on, carbs versus protein when you're just kind of in the heat of the battle.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. So the body isn't efficient at all at turning protein into fuel. But what protein does do, but this doesn't sound like an issue for you, protein is very satiating. So someone like me, I'm one of those people that I could just eat forever. Like, I am always hungry. So for me, getting some protein means I'm not stood on every tea box digging in the bag trying to find something else to eat. So if you're someone that wants to eat more and more and more, having some protein in it keeps you satiated. But for you, yeah, the Uncrustables are exactly what you said. It's easy fuel. Your body can use that, and especially, yeah, they're not stereotypically healthy food. I wouldn't advise you to have your whole diet made up of it, obviously. But on the golf course, the priority is your golf. It's easy energy, and for you, if you're sort of didn't like eating per se, it's calorie dense, especially with peanut butter in it. Obviously, peanut butter is about the most calorie dense thing you can eat. You're getting a lot of fuel for not a lot of chewing. Do you know what I mean? So in hindsight, it wasn't the worst thing that you could have picked, to be
Yeah,
honest.
it was just
It's probably
interesting because
slightly better things, if be
there's
remiss to not mention that. But
definitely slightly better things. I just it was the thing that I could get down the fastest, and I knew it was going to give me that energy. And it was like I never like the only time I would eat those would be on the golf course on a 36 hole day, and it was just what I found to be the most consistent thing. Sometimes that
oh
is what
yeah,
matters.
100%, and it's better than nothing. You, like, eating virtually anything is better than eating nothing, because it is fuel. Ultimately, your body needs it, and like you said, especially on a 36 whole day at college. Like, so you were mentioning the calories. So what Daniel mentioned is about my tracker. So I built a golf calorie calculator. Basically, I reverse engineered. There's a study that came out this year, a really good one, measuring calorie impact of golfers. So I sort of took, I'm sure you've seen calorie calculators online, the dime a dozen now, where you go in and you put in your body weight and your height and all that, and it spits out a number. So basically what I did was I took that, the equations behind that, stripped out the golf sort of activity element of it, and then created a separate golf calculator to calculate your golf expenditure and combine the two effectively. So I can calculate the calorie. Obviously, it's an estimate because it's population based, but an estimate of what you burn in a round of golf, what you need daily, and what being able to sort of distinguish the two means you can fuel for a golf day and a non-golf day. Because like you said, you burn so many calories playing golf that, when Daniel and me are sat in an office as a lawyer and a CPA, we're not burning very much. Cooper's playing 36 holes at college. That's so different. So it allows us to quantify that and treat the days differently. I mean, that's called calorie cycling, is the term that you've probably heard banded about online, which literally just means matching your calorie requirements to your needs of the day. We all say, oh, we need 2,500 calories a day. It's not what you don't. One day you need 2,300. On a day with 36 holes, you need 4,300. So this just allows, currently to my knowledge, the most accurate way of just sort of managing that, basically.
It's definitely hard to get enough calories in on a day like that, and it is the most important thing. As far as protein consumption, how many grams of protein would you recommend that somebody eat per pound of body weight? And does this change based on activity level?
No. So per pound is definitely the sort of the best way of doing it. Ideally, you would do it per pound of lean body mass, but that's very hard to measure. So obviously, everybody just does it per pound of body mass in general. It depends on your goals. So when you say depends on your activity, it kind of does, because if that is activity is lots of resistance training, so if you're doing loads of speed training in the gym, you're lifting weights, you're trying to get strong and fast, you would want a higher amount of protein to recover from that. But activity in terms of calorie burn wouldn't make a difference, because you don't want to be using it for fuel. Do you know what I mean? You want to be taking in carbs and fats that you're using for fuel. So in terms of a number, obviously it'll vary per person, like 1.6 grams per kilogram. So what's about 0.7 grams per pound is sort of a good middle ground. So if you're hitting that, you're probably not leaving a lot out there. I aim for more than that, because I like a lot of protein foods. I have a lot of good protein habits, that I call it. It's very easy for me to eat a lot of protein. If someone's never paid attention to it before, that would be a complete diet overhaul to them, and would probably almost do more disruption than it would good. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. But yeah, if you want a ballpark figure for someone, playing golf, which is physical enough, probably doing some sort of either speed training, weight training, something like that, you wouldn't go wrong with 1.6 per kilogram.
When it comes to getting enough protein, one of the tools that I've used for a long time, just because it's hard to get that much protein in a day. I mean, it's doable, but eating normal foods and spreading that protein out, and you can maybe correct this if I'm wrong. My understanding, at least back at the time, was there's only so much protein at a time that your body can process before some of it gets turned away. So if you ate 100 grams of protein in the same meal, let's actually start with that. If you ate 100 grams of protein in one sitting, would all of that be efficiently processed, or would some of that be just lopped off as waste?
It wouldn't be wasted, in the sense of that's 300,000 years of human evolution has meant we're pretty good with what we store. There is a limit to the benefit you can get in the anabolic signaling, that they call it in one. So you might have heard of muscle protein synthesis, which is what you're trying to trigger, obviously by doing your resistance training and by eating your protein, which triggers your muscle to grow. So over about 40 grams. So there's an amino acid called leucine, which is in protein, which is what triggers it. But the equivalent of about 40 grams of protein will maximally trigger muscle protein synthesis. So even if you ate 100 grams, you wouldn't get a bigger signal, but your body would still use it. Some of it would probably be converted to energy, because obviously that's also a lot of calories. That's more than half of most people's protein requirement. So there's a limit to how much your body would then. You're not going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger in a week because you ate 400 grams of protein a day.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it's not wasted in the sense of, your body disposes of it, for want of a less vulgar term.
Yeah.
But it won't. There's a limit to the signal benefit that you will get from it.
Okay, that makes sense. So as far as when it comes to that signal benefit, I guess it depends on each person and their state, but all else being equal, is maximizing the signal benefit something we want to do? So as opposed to having 100 calorie or 100 grams of protein in a meal, if we space that out 40, 40, and 20 over different periods of time, would that provide a benefit to us? Again, all else being equal, compared to that 101 sitting?
Yes, exactly that. So you want to distribute your protein as widely as possible with every sort of 3 to 5 hours. So the signal will raise. So it looks, obviously this isn't great podcasting, so I'm doing a diagram on my hands, but so it's like a bell curve. It will go up and then it will just taper off. So that takes 3 to 5 hours. So you want to space your protein between 20 and 40 grams, ideally. 20 grams is sort of where you get the majority of the signal, and then 40 grams is where you don't get any more over it. So for a lot of normal people that might only be eating 120 to 150 grams a day, if you could split that into 30-gram doses, and it's not rocket science to have, if you can get it in your breakfast, your lunch and your dinner and a snack somewhere, that's your 430s, that's 120, and you've probably spaced it out at 7 a.m, midday, 3 p.m. snack, 8 p.m. dinner. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So you can get the vast majority of the benefits.
Okay.
In a fairly regular eating pattern, but that's where it comes down to. A lot of people sort of don't eat a lot of protein in breakfast. It's very common to you have a bowl of Lucky Charms rather than something with protein in it. So you can get the majority of the benefit from fairly regular.
Okay, and you want to spread that out over 3 to 5 hours, you said? So every 3 to 5 hours?
Yeah, that's where the signal then is virtually back to baseline. So then if you take in another protein dose, you spike it back up. So basically you're maximizing the amount of time in a day that your muscles are turned on. The builders are building effectively, and you're maximizing the time that happens.
Okay. So then that leads me, I'm so glad I asked that, because it leads me kind of into my next question, which is about how to get those. Obviously, where you are can change a lot of things. Where you are in life can change a lot of things too. And one of the ways I've tried to make sure I get enough protein throughout my life, since I started putting on weight, is with protein powder. And I know that sometimes I've heard like if you want to do the most optimal thing, a lot of nutritionists will say, well, that's not the most optimal. But also when you're adjusting and accounting for the fact that individuals are busy and have a limited amount of time, and especially when you're talking about getting that maybe 3 o'clock snack or that 10 o'clock snack of protein in, sometimes you just got to get it however you can get it. What are your thoughts on, one, protein powder, and two, kind of going into that framework? And selfishly, honestly, I'm thinking about this in my context of my own life. How many servings of protein powder, assuming one serving of protein powder has about 30 grams of protein in it, how many servings of those should you or could you do a day without terrible, or without like a noticeable degradation in the quality of protein that you're consuming? Like ignoring the idea of fillers or other things like that, which are present in some like maltodextrin, things like ignoring maltodextrin and other things that can change change your GI tract, etc.
Yeah, I mean, there is no inherent issue with. I mean, I take protein powder, and again, like, we're big guys. For us to get, I mean, I try and eat sort of 200 grams of protein a day. Really, that's a lot of chicken. Like, I wouldn't. I'd be bored of it. Do you know what I mean? So I take protein shakes as well. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. You're absolutely right. They're convenient, for you don't have to cook them. You can take them with you if you're in the office. Obviously, you just pre scoop it in your shaker and you just take it with you, and it's easy as that. So I mean, yeah, they're a really convenient and helpful way to get your protein in. I mean, I would agree, you probably don't want to be taking all of your protein from them, not because that would be inherently bad. I mean, it comes from whey. It's a byproduct of milk, assuming you're not vegan. I'll come to that in a minute. But so I mean, it's quality protein. That's not the problem. It's just there's a lot of other things you get in food from, your red meats, your white meats, your fish. My only question would be not that there is an issue with the protein that you're taking. It's that, are you still getting the other nutrition that you would have got if you had eaten a steak or chicken or fish, your other protein, milk, cheese, whatever. So it's not the case of that there is an issue with the protein that you're taking. It's just, if the rest of your diet is fine, if you are getting everything that you need, there is nothing stopping you taking as much protein powder as you like, effectively. But if I do then just come on to sort of vegans and vegetarians, that's vegetarians less so, because obviously you can eat eggs and milk and things. But for vegans, I mean, it's an almost necessary way of getting, especially if you want to hit some of the levels of protein intake that we're talking about. If you were to get them from a lot of vegan sources, there's a lot of obviously like nuts and legumes and things, but there's a lot of calories per protein. Obviously, chicken breast is virtually all protein, so it's a very calorie efficient way of getting it. Obviously, peanut butter is the classic example that in fitness is a protein food. But if you were going to get all your protein from that, you would have to eat about 12,000 calories a day. So it's also the most calorie efficient way of doing it, especially for people that are looking to either go vegan or just eat more plant-based in general.
Do you think there's anything to it when people say that vegans get injured more frequently? I remember this was a big topic with Cam Newton, NFL player, huge guy, and
Yeah.
he was 100% vegan, and he, got injured like multiple times during the season, and a lot of people attributed it to the fact that he was vegan. And I was just kind of sitting there wondering, like, how many pea protein shakes can you drink on a daily basis, because that's kind of the only way you're going to get the amount of protein that you need. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason that you can't eat a vegan diet and be perfectly healthy. However, you have to accept that it requires a lot of effort and a lot of potential compensation elsewhere. So when it comes to injury, I mean, I'm not a physio, so I don't want to overstep my scope of practice, but it's common to be, to use that example, it's common to be deficient in calcium, because obviously we would get that from a lot of milk and things like that. That as a vegan, if you are deficient in that, that would increase your injury risk because it's going to impact your bones. It is possible, and I mean, so a lot of foods now that you can see they're fortified. So a lot of vegans might be deficient in B12, and a lot of cereals and like almond milks and things you'll see are fortified with B12 because obviously they're common foods that vegan people eat. So it is possible, and I would say for someone like Cam Newton with the resources behind him, you should probably be able to do it well, because you could probably have a whole team of people. He's going to have a nutritionist, a chef, whatever else he could possibly want, that you would think he'd be able to compensate for that.
Going back to the protein as far as consumption in a day, tell us a little bit about your diet as far as like if you were structuring out like, hey, I'm trying to, as you said, you're an intense guy and you like to optimize. It sounds like if you're optimizing your diet in a day, and let's just say, let's golf aside right now, let's just talk about you in the office. What are you doing? And then compare that to what you're doing if you're going out and caddying.
Okay, so I tend to have to start at the beginning. Start at breakfast. I've pretty much got 3 breakfasts that I cycle between, or at least 3 styles of breakfast. So like egg based. So generally I like an omelette because I like cheese. So I'll have an omelette, put some veg in it, whatever's in the fridge, whether it's spinach or mushrooms or onion or whatever. I like yogurt, and I find that Greek yogurt is very high protein. That was my first discovery when I was making the journey, like the fitness journey towards trying to eat more protein. And like I said earlier, generally the meal that you suffer is breakfast. Like I've never had a problem eating meat and fish. Like my other meals are generally pretty good, but breakfast. So the Greek yogurt was the first thing I found that was like, yeah, I can hammer that in the morning. That's fine. So I'll have a bowl of Greek yogurt with either some muesli or some like bran flake style cereal in it for some fiber, because you won't get a lot of that in the yogurt, with blueberries, raspberries, things like that generally. And then my other one will be, I would call it porridge. You guys would call it oatmeal. So, and then protein porridge generally. So I'll just buy the supermarket. I'll buy a chocolate flavor and a golden syrup flavor. And then I have chocolate and golden syrup protein powder and just make that up with berries and a banana or whatever. So that'll be the 3 breakfasts. And then I eat a lot of different foods. I think it's just through the years I've acquired different recipes. I do meal prep, but not in the real hardcore fitness sense. It's just whatever I fancy cooking, I'll make 3 of. So then it's in the fridge or the freezer. So I'll take that to the office. So I was in the office the other day, and I had a thing of risotto in the fridge that I'd made, which obviously stops you going into town and getting whatever you may have to get at the time. And I mean, like I said, and dinner's very much the same because of my calorie intake. My lunches and dinners look the same because they're both like sort of 800 calories. Obviously, for a lot of people, lunch and dinner looks very different because they eat light in the day. For me, I try and make 3 meals of sort of 700 to 800 calories, and then I'll have a snack. So I like protein snacks, so like protein cookies, protein bars. I'll take to the office because, like I said, because I get hungry a lot, I would rather eat my protein than drink my protein. It's no different to a shake, basically. It just obviously you get a few more calories and you're chewing something.
And when you're on the course, does that change as far as how you're managing your calorie consumption and the timeline of it?
Yeah, so the timeline would definitely change. So when you're playing, I mean, I don't have. This is different to if I was playing on tour because I don't tend to have many 7 a.m. tea times where obviously you have to wake up very early. So, but generally you want to eat as early as possible on the day that you're playing to start your body fueling, to start digesting ultimately. So get up in time is some very good advice. Get up in time for a decent breakfast, and so that you're also not stood on the first tee with a belly full of bacon and eggs or whatever you've eaten. So that would change. But for me personally, that doesn't change often because I don't often play that early in the morning. But it's just about making sure. So for me, obviously, I have the numbers and I know how many calories I want to get in before I play. So then the question to ask yourself is, if you've got either a lunchtime tea time or one of those awkward in between, like 11 a.m. tea times, do I need to eat twice? And generally for me, that's yes. For other people, it might not be. But the trade-off there is you might eat once, but you would need to eat all of the food that you need pre-round in one meal, which might be a lot, as opposed to I would wake up at 7 or 6:30, whenever I normally wake up, have a smaller bit of food, and then eat a proper meal before, like bring lunch forward and maybe eat it at 10 o'clock then before going out. So yeah, the timelines you want to move because you want to be fueled for when you tee off ultimately. Whereas yeah, like you said, when we're in the office, it doesn't matter greatly.
I know there's a lot of meal plans or diet plans out there will tell you that right before you go to bed, you need to supplement with protein because, you're getting 8 hours without any nutrients getting taken in. But there's also differing opinions on that you don't need to do this. And if you eat eat enough protein during the day, that you'll be good. Your muscle's not gonna deteriorate just because you didn't eat protein before you go to bed. What are your thoughts on this? And
Yeah, I think you have to be realistic about it and say, what are you actually gaining and is it worth it? Because theoretically it's true. So like we were talking about earlier on with spiking your protein as much as possible, because you're not eating overnight, that is obviously a long period of time where that protein signal hasn't happened. But you have to ask yourself if you've eaten the amount during the day. So protein target is the main thing. Eating enough protein is step one. How you distribute it is step two. So realistically, if you've eaten a good breakfast, a good lunch, a good dinner, you've eaten a snack, you've spread your protein out 4 times, you might not have enough protein to spread it further. You might be dropping further below the 20-gram threshold where you're spiking it more times, but you're not spiking it as high. You're not reaching that. So they call it like the anabolic threshold, where if you're not reaching that, you're not achieving it anyway. So otherwise you could say, well, why don't I split my 150 grams into 15 10-gram doses and be permanently jacked? But that's not, you wouldn't reach, the signal wouldn't be strong enough to gain the benefit. So it is an optimization thing basically. And so for someone like me, because I try and take in nearly 200 grams of protein, I can do that because I have more protein. The threshold seems largely absolute, no matter how big you are. So the 20 to 40 grams is constant, whether you weigh 110 or whether you weigh 210. So for me, I can get a lot of 30-gram doses into 200 grams of protein. For someone that might be a much smaller guy, 130, who only takes in 120 grams of protein, you can't split it as much. So if you get them in during the day, you don't need to worry as much at night.
Kind of related to that, I remember the first physical trainer I ever had. He was kind of an old school guy, and he used to always refer to the hour after you work out as like the golden hour, or like the hour of power. Like you have to eat so much protein within that hour, or else, you know, you've lost your chance to rebuild your muscles with calories and protein. And kind of lately, I think it was actually Mike Carroll who put this out there, and he said that that's kind of a myth, and that you really have like 3-4 hours. I might be wrong on this. It's been a while since I've read that exact literature that he put out there. But do you believe that golden hour is a myth, or is it actually this strict?
Yes, the anabolic window is what a lot of people refer to it as, and no, it's not. It comes back again to that distribution. So pre-workout protein has been shown to be as efficient as post-workout protein. What matters is where that spike is. So if you took a shake just before working out, you're going to be spiking it, so you don't need one after it, because that is independent of the workout. So it is a thing if you hadn't eaten, or some people like waking up and training fasted. I mean, that's a different conversation. But if you have done that, then I would say, yeah, you want to get it protein in you sort of as quick as you can, because you've worked your muscles hard. They want to recover. You want to signal to start recovering. But if you're spacing your protein doses correctly during the day, it doesn't exist, because it almost is independent of when you work out. If your spikes are constantly going up, it doesn't matter when you work out, because it will be near one, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I mean, I love the depth that you bring to these conversations. I mean, these are things that we can pick up tidbits here and tidbits there, and there's a lot of good stuff out there. But I like how you condense it all, especially can apply it to golf, which for us is what we're focused on, and we're also focused on tournaments. So those are key components as far as what we consume. I can tell you, there's a lot of mistakes that I've made as a junior as far as what I ate, when I ate it, and especially when it came to golf, making sure I had that calorie cycle right, and that I was consuming and releasing calories in a good time manner to maintain energy on the course. But beyond just consuming the calories, there's also something else I wanted to switch gears to a little bit on the nutrition side, which is hydration. I saw a graphic that you put out on Instagram, and I'll give people the quick rundown. I'll let you dive in a little bit more about hydration. And one of the things that I think you touched on, which is important, and most people, A, still don't know now, but B, I didn't know in college, was that if your pee is clear, that's not necessarily a good thing. I drink a ton of water, and I'll tell you, my pee was always clear. And it wasn't until I was in college and I saw this chart about what color your pee should be, and it's supposed to have like a little light shade of yellow or something like that. And that was the first time I realized, hey, these 12 gallons of water I'm drinking a day, not actually, but close to that, that might be a little too much. That might not be the best thing for my kidneys. And beyond that, even times where I did have adequate hydration as far as consuming water, I still felt thirsty, or that feeling when you're like, you finished up and you've like drank as much water as possible, your stomach's full, you can feel it like swelling, and you're like still looking around like, where can I find more water? I know I'm not thirsty per se, but I definitely am. There's something in me that wants to drink more, so I've got to figure this out. So tell us a little bit more about hydration in general, electrolytes, and how that plays into golf and golf prep.
Yeah, so hydration, really important. I think it's very often overlooked. I think it's not the most exciting subject. I think I might have even put that in my post that you're referring to, that it's not the sexiest subject to talk about, as opposed to like protein and carb cycling and things like that. But dehydration of as little as 2% is shown to impair performance. And that includes cognitive performance, that includes decision making, which is pretty important on the golf course. So yeah, definitely something to think about. I think when you refer to electrolytes, that's absolutely right. I think they can be overplayed in golf, and the reason being is that we get to eat. There's not a lot of sports where you get to eat in the middle of it, and you will take in electrolytes through your food. Electrolytes are literally salts, effectively. It's minerals, which they will be in your food. So if you're eating a lot, they're not as important. I mean, there's some places, if you're sweating a lot, it's probably still a good idea. Thinking back to some of the, the 110-degree days in Vegas and stuff, you sort of wanted them. But so that would come back to where your hydration isn't just water. You can, and this is an extreme case. It's not something that would apply to any golfer in the real world. But I mean, endurance athletes die of having too much water. It's hyponatremia, it's called, where you dilute the salt content in your blood. So you're taking in water, but you're sweating out electrolytes, and the water you're taking in is doing more harm than good because it's further diluting the mineral balance that you've got. So that is why drinking water past a point isn't hydrating you. What you need is electrolytes to get that balance correct in your bloodstream.
That's actually funny that you bring that up, because there was this guy that he was a coach at the old golf academy that I went to, and he was always putting pink Himalayan salt in his water. And he was like, you guys got to do this because people's hearts stop beating if they don't do this. And we always thought he was crazy, but now I guess I have to eat my words on that one.
Yeah, no, and that is right. So they're charged particles. They help your body move electric charges through it, and that's how your heart beats. So he was actually probably more right than he realized. But yeah, no, and that is also a valid way of doing it. I mean, I give that advice, especially for people like amateurs that are just going out on a Sunday morning. If you don't want to go and spend, £3 on whatever sports drinks overpriced in the pro shop, just put some salt. Sea salt, pink Himalayan salt is technically, I think, has the best spectrum of electrolytes, but it makes very, very little difference. Just a bit of sea salt, something like that, pinch it in your. I mean, I do that because I'm tight. I'm an accountant, so I make my own sports drinks as well. So yeah, that is genuinely good advice for anybody.
Smart man. I like that. We have a lot of questions left for you, and honestly, we're going to have to do a second episode sometime if that's okay, because I know that there's a lot, A, that we haven't thought of already that we're going to want to ask, B, also things that we thought of already that it probably isn't in the best interest of time. It's probably best to just condense that into one episode. So I'll kind of lead us to our last question. You've listened, you know it. If you go back to yourself as a junior golfer, what is the one thing you would tell yourself? And then two, because you do the nutritionist side, you focus on that. If you could tell a junior golfer just one thing about their nutrition and have them change it, what would it be?
I think to do the golf one first, I think it would be, to quote Lou Stagner on Twitter, it is manage your expectations. I think I'm someone that's very intense and very hard on myself on a lot of things. And I was really never that good and then when you start appreciating dispersion patterns, obviously to go back to decade style thing, you're firing a shotgun, you're not firing a rifle. Like, I think that the sooner you learn that and truly accept the role of luck, ultimately the role of randomness, I think that makes it a whole lot easier to swallow. And to a nutrition side, I think pick, and this is something that I try to be now as someone with a bit more information than I used to have, is I wish I could remember where I heard the term, but I can't quote it to whoever it was. And it's pick the arbiter of your information. So find people that you trust, that you know work the same way that you do. So for me, and in my opinion, the way everybody should be, is evidence-based, is science-backed, is because I mean, even me, who now obviously does this as a job, I don't have time to research everything that I say. I still have places when I'm writing these posts, I still have people that I go to see what they think about it. So it's one of my lecturers that I still follow from the courses that I did and things like that you can't read it all yourself. Pick a handful of people that you trust, whether it's social media accounts, whether it's newsletters, whether it's more official places like examine.com. If anyone ever has a question about generally like a supplement, look for it on examine.com, and they have all the studies broken down. Like find good information, because there's so much bad information out there.
That's smart. And that's something that we try to do too here. I mean, there's an information funnel that goes on, and the truth is we can't all be at the top of the information funnel, because the top of the informational tunnel or funnel is usually studies. It's stuff like that are very time consuming. And then it goes down. And what the most popular people, I think, do well, especially in this area, are take that information in the information funnel and then make it understandable and relatable. That's something I think that Mike Carroll does well. It's something I think that a guy like Andrew Huberman does well. And I think that's something that you do well as far as your Instagram posts. I look at them, and every time I see them, like, oh man, that's something I wish I would have known. That's something that I wish I would have been able to tell myself and adjust to, not just when I was a kid, but yesterday when I was making decisions about what I was going to drink or what I was going to eat. So I think that's great advice, and we were glad that you're part of that for us, as far as being part of that trusted arbiter of information. For people who want to learn more about you, learn more about your products, get involved with you, where can they find you?
So on Instagram, it's SG Nutrition Ben. So we've been doing some posts that you've just referred to. I've been collaborating with Nick from Stronger Golf, who's another really good. So he's the golf fitness side of it, so I'm bringing the nutrition bit to it. So we've been doing some posts on Instagram, and anyone's welcome to email me, ben@strokesgainnutrition.co.uk. I'm on Twitter, the same handle as Instagram, but I don't use Twitter quite as much. That's more of a more for viewing and tutting at people's information than contributing. But I probably should contribute more on Twitter, to be honest.
Thanks for joining us today. Please do us a big favor and like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, so we can help others learn how to play better tournament golf. You can find us online at thetournamentcode.com, on Instagram at thetournamentcode, and on Twitter at tournamentcode. As always, feel free to reach out to us at those places, or email us at daniel@thetournamentcode.com and cooper@thetournamentcode.com. We hope you join us as we continue to dive deeper into what it takes to play elite tournament golf.